My name is Ava Reed, and I was supposed to sing at Carnegie Hall before I turned 18. Instead, I spent my 17th birthday learning how to whisper again. Not speak, not sing, whisper. It started with a shove, a laugh, a cracked vocal cord, and silence that lasted nearly a year. I wasn't in a car crash. I wasn't in a fire. I was in a hallway, in a music academy, and the person who ruined my voice smiled as she did it. Her name was Veronica Price, and last week, I signed a record deal with the label that just fired her. But we're not there yet. Let me take you back to when my voice was the only thing that made me feel real. I was never the loud girl. You know, the type: loud laughs, loud fashion, loud opinions. That wasn't me. I was the background girl. The one who read poetry instead of partying. The one who hummed harmonies under her breath. The one who closed her eyes when she sang, not for performance, but because the music felt like a secret only I understood. People noticed me only when I opened my mouth, and when I did, something happened. I didn't turn heads. I stilled them. I didn't know why. I wasn't trained. I couldn't afford private lessons. But my voice, it made people quiet. It made rooms breathe slower. It made my teachers cry. At 16, I got a full scholarship to the Crescent City Arts Academy voice program, the best in the region, maybe the country. And that's where I met her. Veronica, blonde, blue-eyed, born in silk. She had a voice like a machine, flawless, powerful, cold, every note calculated, every gesture rehearsed. She was everything I wasn't, and she hated that I was better, not by technique, but by truth. I never tried to compete with her, but the moment I was cast as the soloist in the spring showcase, the one she thought was hers, she made me her target. I still remember the moment it happened. A week before the big performance, I had just left rehearsal, my throat sore but happy. I was walking down the side staircase, earbuds in, backpack swinging, and then I felt it. A hand, a push, stone steps. I don't remember the fall, but I remember the silence after. No scream, just impact and blood. When I opened my mouth to call for help, nothing came out. Literally nothing. I was rushed to the hospital. The diagnosis? Hemorrhaged vocal cords, a partial tear. The doctor's words were clear. You'll need complete vocal rest. Months, maybe more, maybe forever. Forever. The one thing that made me was gone. Veronica, she visited me. She brought flowers and a fake apology. I heard you fell. I'm so sorry, she said, eyes shining with crocodile tears. I hope you heal soon. Maybe next year you can try out again. The nurses thought she was an angel. I knew better, but I couldn't say a word, not even a whisper. I had to leave the academy. I couldn't keep up with classes. I couldn't rehearse. I couldn't even speak in full sentences. I went back home to my small town, my quiet room, my even quieter future. My mom tried to keep me hopeful. My dad didn't understand what the big deal was. It's just singing, he said once, and I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I saw 5 specialists. All of them told me the same thing: rest, time, hope, hope. What a cruel word when you're 17 and silent. It took 7 months before I made a sound louder than a cough, 9 months before I could hum, 11 before I could sing a full verse. But when I did, it was different. Raspy, shaky, imperfect, but raw and real. It wasn't the voice of a girl anymore. It was the voice of someone who had been through something. I started uploading covers to YouTube under a fake name. No face, no bio, just sound. My sound, cracked and bruised and honest. People listened, slowly, then suddenly, a cover of Hallelujah hit 200,000 views. A producer from Los Angeles messaged me. He said, "There's something in your tone, something you can't fake." He didn't ask for my age, my resume, my school, just my voice, and I gave it. 2 months later, I was flown out to Crescent Records. Yes, the same label that sponsored my old academy. The same one where Veronica now worked as a junior exec. Except, not anymore, because 3 days before I signed the deal she was fired. Creative differences, the press said, but I knew. She'd mocked an anonymous demo in a staff meeting, called it emotionally manipulative trash. That demo was mine, and when the CEO found out, she was gone. Just like that. When I walked into the lobby of Crescent Records to sign the contract, I passed her picture on the wall. Framed, dusty, outdated. She used to run this place. Now I own the next 6 records coming out of it. Have you ever had someone try to erase your voice only to have it echo louder than ever? Tell me in the comments. Because the ones who rise again, They sing the loudest. I remember sitting in the contract meeting, holding the pen, staring at the paper with my name printed neatly on top. Ava Reed. For a moment, I felt dizzy, not because I was nervous, but because I realized this signature wasn't just about music. It was closure. It was justice, the silent kind. And as I pressed the pen to the paper, a memory hit me like a quiet wave. The moment I'd been wheeled out of the hospital, my throat wrapped in gauze, my future dimmed. Back then, I thought it was the end. Now I knew it was the beginning. And just as I signed, my phone buzzed. A notification. Crescent Records welcomes rising indie sensation Arya Stoney to our label. 1,000 likes in 5 minutes. Veronica's old coworkers were tagging her name in the comments. Isn't this the girl whose demo you rejected? Poetic. When I walked out of the building that day, the air felt clearer than I remembered. And somewhere, maybe in a rehearsal room, or maybe in the back of her Tesla, Veronica Price saw my name trending and knew she hadn't silenced me. She had sharpened me. She walked in like she owned the room. Back straight, heels sharp, hair pulled so tight it looked painful. Same scent, citrus and cold steel. Same expression, 1 part elegance, 2 parts judgment. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I just stood in the sound booth, staring through the glass at the girl who once smiled while I was bleeding. Veronica Price. She wasn't supposed to be here. 2 years ago, I would have stopped breathing. My throat would have clenched. My body would have folded into itself like a scared animal. But not today. Today, I was someone else. The session had started normal. Jay, my producer, was guiding me through harmonies for the 3rd track on my debut EP. The song was raw, the kind of raw you don't fix in post. The lyrics were about losing everything and still getting up to face the day like nothing hurt. He called it the razor blade lullaby. I just called it survival. We were halfway through the chorus when the door opened. She strolled in like it was her studio, her music, her story. But it wasn't. Not anymore. At first, I thought she didn't recognize me. She walked right past the booth, smiling at Jay, chatting about brand alignment and market timing. It was all white noise. Until she turned to the glass and froze. I saw it in her eyes. Recognition, shock, then panic, like she'd seen a ghost. But I didn't let her off the hook. I kept my eyes locked on hers. No smile, no fear, just silence. The same silence she left me into years ago. Jay noticed the tension instantly. Everything good? He asked, glancing between us. Veronica composed herself like a true performer. Oh, sure, she said, waving a manicured hand. Didn't realize Arya Stoney was local. Her voice cracked slightly on the name. I didn't respond. Jay, unaware of the history, jumped in. She's not just local, she's Crescent's newest powerhouse. Wait until you hear the 2nd verse. Veronica looked at me again, harder this time. Like if she stared long enough, she could figure out how I got here. How someone like me ended up where she thought she belonged. When Jay stepped out for a call, she made her move, slid into the booth, closed the door behind her. It was just the 2 of us. She didn't speak at first, just looked. Then, you changed your name. I tilted my head. No, I just stopped using the one you buried. She swallowed. Her eyes darted to the mic, then back to me. You're still singing? That almost made me laugh. Is that surprising? I asked. You thought I'd stay silent forever? She didn't answer. Didn't need to. We both knew the truth. She hadn't pushed me down those stairs by accident. It was deliberate. A warning shot, but I'd risen anyway. I didn't expect this, she said finally. I stepped closer. Good, I whispered. Neither did I. But here we are. I let the silence hang. Let her feel the weight of it. The reversal. The shift. She looked down, adjusted the bracelet on her wrist, and said the only thing she could think of. You sound different. I leaned in, close enough for her to hear every breath. Scars will do that to a voice. Then I turned back to the mic, put the headphones on, and let the beat roll. The first note came low, dark, controlled. The second, stronger, sharper, built from bone. By the chorus, I wasn't just singing. I was exposing. Every lyric was a blade disguised as poetry. Every melody a memory she thought I'd buried. And she stood there outside the glass now, watching me do what she tried to destroy. Not in anger, not in vengeance, but in mastery. When I finished the take, Jay clapped. That's the one, he said. You want to hear playback? I glanced at Veronica. She hadn't moved. Her hands clenched tightly around her phone, knuckles white. No, I said calmly. I think she already heard it. Then I walked past her. slow, silent, victorious. That night, I uploaded a teaser clip from the session, just 10 seconds, a single line from the chorus. You took my voice, but not my echo. The video went viral in 4 hours. The comment section exploded. Who hurt her? This is brutal and beautiful. Is this about someone specific? Because if so, yikes. I don't even know the full story, but I'm fully on her side. And in the middle of them all, one quiet comment stood out. No profile picture, no followers. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. I didn't block it. I just let it sit there. A fossil of guilt beneath a mountain of growth. Because the goal was never to humiliate her. It was to rise in front of her, louder than she ever allowed me to be. Have you ever stood face to face with someone who tried to erase you and realized they no longer had that power? Tell me in the comments. Because healing is the loudest revenge. Fame has a strange way of exposing people. It doesn't just amplify your voice, it magnifies your cracks. The week after the teaser clip went viral, everything changed. Not just for me, for her, Veronica Price. She had always existed in polished perfection: the hair, the titles, the curated posts about empowering young artists and giving back to the community. But once the internet got a whiff of her shadow, that perfect mask began to crumble. And I got a front row seat. It started subtly. Whispers. People talking in hushed tones behind office doors. Quick glances when she walked into the Crescent Records building. DMs from people I hadn't heard from since the academy. Is it true? Was she really the one who we always kind of knew? Screenshots leaked. Anonymous forum posts. Nothing concrete, but just enough. Enough to make people start asking questions. Enough to make the board start rechecking her old emails, her old press statements, her old mentorship cases. Enough to spark curiosity. And curiosity, once lit, is hard to extinguish. She stopped coming to the studio. The meetings were rescheduled. The comments on her last Instagram post, a filtered photo of her holding a wine glass, had turned from flame emojis and boss babe tags to cold, uncomfortable truths. Funny how karma sings louder than your favorite artist. Should have pushed your own limits, not other people downstairs. She tried to ignore it. Delete, block, deny. But nothing disappears once the internet has teeth in it. 3 days later, I was at a label mixer, a celebration event for new talent. I hadn't planned to go, but Jay insisted. This is your moment, he said. Don't hide. You earned this. So I went, not in a gown, not in designer anything, just black jeans, boots, and a quiet confidence that didn't need a spotlight to feel seen. The venue was crowded, glittering, loud, but all the noise fell away the moment I saw her. Veronica, in the corner, alone, no entourage, no interns, no cameras, just a glass of something amber in her hand, and a look on her face I had never seen before. Not anger, not arrogance, but loss. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe part of me still wanted to understand her, to look her in the eye, not as a victim or a rival but as a witness. So I walked over. She didn't notice me at first, but when she looked up, her breath caught. You came, she said, voice thinner than I remembered. I was invited, I answered simply. A pause. Then, almost to herself, she said, I didn't think they'd still let me in. That surprised me. Not the admission, the vulnerability. She swirled the drink in her hand, then set it down and touched. They're pulling contracts, reviewing my entire mentorship history. Someone leaked internal notes. They're acting like I'm radioactive. I didn't say anything. Because what could I say? She looked at me again, really looked, not as competition, not as a threat, just as a person. And then she whispered something I never thought I'd hear from her. I thought I was doing what it took to survive. Back then, at the academy, I raised an eyebrow. By pushing people? She shook her head slowly. No, that was cruelty. I know that now. But the rest of it? The lying, the pretending, the stealing credit. I was just scared. Scared. Veronica Price, the girl who walked like she owned the world, was scared. I saw you getting everything I wanted, and I panicked. I wasn't special. I was trained. You were born with it. I didn't know how to compete with that. I studied her face. She looked older, not in years and weight. And maybe for the first time I understood. Veronica hadn't just tried to break me. She'd been breaking herself all along. She looked down, then added, when you sang in that studio, I heard what I destroyed, and I hated myself for it. A long pause. And then she looked at me with teary, bloodshot eyes and asked, do you hate me? I didn't answer right away. I thought about that night in the hospital, the countless days of silence, the auditions I missed, the songs I was too afraid to sing. I thought about the girl I buried just to survive. And then I said the truest thing I'd ever said to her. No, I don't hate you, but I can't excuse you either. She nodded, as if she already knew. I don't expect forgiveness, she said. I just wanted to say it before I disappear. Disappear? She looked away. I'm leaving. La Crescent, the scene, all of it. And I believed her, because Veronica Price, the mask, was already gone. What stood before me was just a girl, scared, small, tired of performing. She walked out 20 minutes later. No drama, no spotlight, just silence. The same silence she once weaponized now surrounding her like a curtain call. I stayed at the party another hour. People asked about upcoming releases, about my creative process, about my next single. I answered with ease, because I no longer had to carry the weight of her story, only mine. And mine was just beginning. Have you ever watched the person who hurt you finally break and felt something other than revenge? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes, real power is knowing you don't need to destroy them to win. It started with one voice, mine, cracked, untrained, soaked in years of silence. It wasn't polished, it wasn't even perfect, but it was real. That's what people heard. And when the first verse of Louder in Silence dropped on streaming platforms, I expected a few thousand plays at most, some loyal followers, maybe a few late-night reposts. What I didn't expect was a wildfire. By noon, it was on the homepage of For Music blogs. By nightfall, it was everywhere. I remember sitting in my living room, knees pulled to my chest, phone vibrating nonstop, reading comment after comment like prayers I never asked for. I don't know who hurt her, but I felt every word. This is what surviving sounds like. She didn't just sing. She bled into the mic. Louder in Silence made me cry in a gas station parking lot. Thank you. And then the messages started coming, not from fans, from survivors, from girls, from boys, from women in their 40s and kids in high school who heard their own stories inside mine. One girl sent me a video, 17 years old, shaking as she spoke. I haven't sung since my choir teacher told me I'd never be good enough. But after hearing your song, I recorded myself again. Another DM came from a nurse who had lost her voice literally after a car accident. She wrote, "This track felt like someone finally understood what it means to be voiceless and still fight to be heard." And I sat there, staring at the screen, stunned by the weight of it all. Because somehow, my scarred voice had turned into a mirror for thousands of other people. The media caught on next. Podcasts, Spotify playlists, even a radio host in New York who opened her segment with, "This week's most requested song isn't a chart topper or a club banger. It's a quiet war cry called Louder in Silence, and if you haven't heard it yet, you probably need to." I didn't smile when I heard that. I wept, because this wasn't just success. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't broken. Proof that art built from pain can still heal. Proof that everything I lost had made space for what I was meant to become. Then came the interview requests, magazines, influencers, talk shows. I turned most of them down, not because I was hiding, because I wanted to protect the why. I wasn't here to be famous. I was here to be true. I agreed to one interview, an independent, trauma-informed podcast called Unbroken Voices. The host was kind, careful. She didn't ask invasive questions. She just said, "Tell me what this song cost you." And I answered, "It cost me silence. It cost me shame. It cost me every version of myself I buried just to survive." Then she asked, "And what did it give you?" I took a breath and said, "Other people." It gave me other people's truth. It gave me community. That interview went viral too. Clips flooded TikTok. Girls lip syncing the lyrics with tears in their eyes. Boys writing, "I sent this to my sister. She needed it more than I did." Survivors of all kinds posting videos that began with, "I was going to stay quiet." But then I heard Ava Reed's story. I didn't know how to carry that at first. I wasn't a therapist. I wasn't a healer. I was just a girl who lost her voice. But maybe that was the point. Because if someone like me, small, silenced, discarded, could rise up and be heard, then maybe others could too. Maybe that was the revolution, not the sound, but the echo. A week later, I got an email from a high school music teacher in Michigan. Her students had chosen Louder in Silence as the closing piece for their spring recital. She attached a video of the rehearsal. 20 kids, some in hoodies, some in dresses, all standing together, harmonizing like their lives depended on it. When the final chorus hit, I found my sound in the silence you left behind. One girl stepped forward and signed the lyrics in ASL while the others sang. I watched that video 17 times. Because that was the whole point. Jay called that night, practically yelling into the phone. "You're going on Fallon," he said. "They want you. No band. No big production. Just you and that song." I didn't say yes immediately. I thought about it, hard. Because stepping onto that stage meant stepping into visibility I'd spent years avoiding. But then I thought about that girl in the rehearsal video, signing the lyrics with shaky hands and a brave face. And I said, let's do it. I didn't wear a gown. I didn't bring a choir. Just me, a spotlight, and a mic. Before I started singing, the crowd was loud the way late night shows always are. But by the first note, pin drop silence. And when I got to the final verse, I didn't even sing. I just spoke it, soft, clear, unapologetic. This is for the girls who stopped singing because someone said they weren't enough. For the ones who were silenced by fear, by pain, by force. You are still a voice. You are still a song. And they don't get to end your story. The room erupted, not in noise, in standing, weeping, clapping. Truth. That clip hit 15 million views in 4 days. But the number didn't matter. What mattered was the DM I got from a girl in Brazil who simply wrote, "I almost didn't survive last year. Then I heard your voice. Now I'm writing my own song." Has someone else's voice ever pulled you out of your own silence? Tell me in the comments. Because when one of us sings through the pain, the whole world learns the chorus. The moment my song went viral, I stopped being a person to some people. I became a product, a brand, a headline, a hashtag. Not Ava, the girl who clawed her voice back from silence, but Arya Stoney, the industry's new favorite tragic success story. They loved the broken girl narrative. They loved it too much. It started with a meeting, polished suits, cold smiles, coffee so expensive it tasted like obligation. I sat at the end of a long glass table, flanked by 3 marketing executives and a publicist who looked barely older than me. They didn't ask how I was feeling. They asked how I felt about repackaging. The first slide of their pitch deck read, "Ava Reed, from silence to stardom." I stared at it in disbelief. They continued anyway. "We're thinking a rebrand," one said. "Keep the vulnerability but add some gloss. Focus more on hope than trauma. Make you feel aspirational. Less pain, more polish." Another chimed in. "We want to pivot you toward empowerment. Less survivor, more role model." I blinked. "Do you want me to rewrite the story?" I asked. The room went quiet. "Well," the publicist said carefully, "we want to make sure the narrative is digestible. Digestible. Like my trauma was too chewy for the general audience." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood up, closed the laptop they had laid out in front of me, and said, "My story is not a product." One of the execs leaned back in his chair, sighing like he was dealing with a stubborn teenager. "Look," he said, "the world doesn't like mess. They want clarity, a clean arc. We're just trying to help shape your story into something inspiring." I met his gaze and said the most important sentence I've ever said in a business meeting. "The story is already inspiring. You just want to own it." I walked out before they could respond, and I didn't go back. That night, Jay called me. "They're freaking out," he said, not unsupportively. "The labels team thinks you're being emotional." I laughed bitterly. "Of course they do. They only like emotions when they can auto-tune them." He sighed. "You still have your EP. You still have your contract. But they might not push it as hard if you won't play along." I stared at my bedroom ceiling, heart pounding, and said, "Let them not push it. I'll pull it myself." The next morning, I went live. Just me, a hoodie, no filter, eyes tired but clear. I didn't call anyone out by name. I didn't rant. I just told the truth. They wanted to package my story into something soft, something palatable. But healing is not always pretty, and survival isn't clean. I didn't rise from silence to be edited down into a Pinterest quote. I expected backlash. I expected silence. Instead, I got a wave. Thousands of comments. Thousands of shares. People saying, "Thank you for refusing to be watered down. My story is messy too. This is why we love you." The industry wanted to own the narrative, but I had already given it away to the people who needed it most. A few days later, I got an email from a journalist. Independent, fierce, no filter. She'd seen the live video and wanted to do a profile piece not on the brand, but the person. We met in a coffee shop with cracked tiles and bad lighting. Perfect. She asked real questions. About guilt, about rage, about the strange loneliness of being seen by millions and known by none. At the end of the interview, she asked one final question. Do you regret not letting them shape the story? I took a long sip of lukewarm coffee, looked her in the eye, and said, not even for a second. Because for the first time in my life, I'm the one writing it. When the article came out, the title was simple. She refused to be polished. It went viral in 24 hours. And this time, no one tried to edit me. Weeks later, a girl messaged me from Seoul. She had been silenced after speaking out against a voice coach in her conservatory. Blacklisted, shamed, she wrote. They told me no one would care what I had to say. Then I saw your story. Now I'm composing again. And I don't care if they hear it, I just care that I do. I cried for 10 minutes straight after reading that. Because the industry wanted to sanitize my story. But the truth is what saved her. That's the power of an unedited voice. It doesn't need permission. It just needs room. Has anyone ever tried to reshape your story to make themselves comfortable? Tell me in the comments. Because your truth isn't a brand, it's a breakthrough. I used to hear my name and flinch. Ava Reed. It sounded like someone I had buried, a version of myself frozen in hospital silence, abandoned stages, and shattered confidence. So when the label first asked, do you want a stage name? I said yes without hesitation. That's how Area Stoney was born. A shield, a veil, a name that sounded like it belonged to someone untouchable. And for a while it worked. It let me create without looking over my shoulder. It let me rise without dragging every painful memory into the spotlight. But eventually, the shield started to feel like a mask, and I was ready to take it off. The moment everything changed wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a sold-out show or a viral video. It was a little girl in a bookstore. I had stopped in to sign some paperwork. A local poetry reading wanted to use a few of my lyrics in a program. No big deal. While I was there, a mother tapped me on the shoulder. Excuse me, she said softly. Are you Area Stoney? I nodded gently. My daughter adores your music. She smiled. She's 9. She plays your songs on repeat, especially Scars in stereo. I smiled back, heartwarming. Then the girl peeked out from behind her mom. Tiny, freckled, bright eyes. She whispered, I want to be like you one day. I knelt to her level. And before I could even think, I said, you already are. My name is Ava. What's yours? She smiled. Maya. We talked for 3 minutes, but those 3 minutes broke something open in me. Because Maya didn't fall in love with Area Stoney the brand. She connected with the truth underneath, the voice, the vulnerability, the story, and suddenly, hiding behind a name I had chosen out of fear, felt like a lie. That night, I called Jay. I want to drop the stage name, I said. There was silence on the other end. Are you sure? He finally asked. Dead sure, I said. If I'm going to keep telling people to own their stories, I should own mine too. He sighed, the kind of sigh producers give when they know you're right, but the label's going to throw a fit. They'll push back, he warned. Brand equity, SEO, all that crap. I don't care, I said. They never own this voice. They're not going to own the name it sings under either. We announced it a week later. A simple post. I'm dropping the name Area Stoney. From now on, I release everything under my real name, Ava. Because the most powerful thing you can ever be is yourself out loud. I expected resistance. Instead, support. An outpouring of messages. This feels right. You've always been Ava to us. Thank you for showing us that healing includes remembering who you are. Even people who didn't know the backstory respected it. Because it wasn't a gimmick. It was growth. Of course, the label had concerns. Calls, emails, strategy meetings. They worried I'd lose followers, lose brand momentum, confuse people. But every day after the announcement, my stream counts rose. Not because the name was different, but because the meaning behind it was honest. And when art is honest, people feel it. 2 weeks later, I performed live under Ava Reed for the first time. Small venue, candlelight, wood floor, raw acoustics. I opened the set with Louder in Silence. And right before the final chorus, I looked out at the crowd and said, some of you knew me as someone else, but this is who I've always been. Tonight, I'm singing as Ava, and I'm singing for every version of me who didn't think she deserved to be heard. I swear I saw tears on faces I didn't even know. Because it wasn't about me anymore. It was about us. Everyone who ever felt safer in a mask than in their own skin. After the show, someone handed me a bouquet. No card, just a folded note inside. One line, It takes more strength to be seen than to hide. You're strong as hell. I kept that note in my guitar case. Still do. Later that year, Spotify changed the name on my artist page. All my releases now under Ava Reed. Jay called me just to say, I guess you were right. I didn't respond with I told you so. I just said, I'm not trying to be right. I'm trying to be real. And for the first time in years, I was. Have you ever hidden behind a name, a title, a role just to feel safe? Tell me in the comments. Because reclaiming your name can feel like reclaiming your life. The email subject line stopped my breath cold. Invitation to guest lecture Crescent City Arts Academy. For a full 30 seconds, I didn't open it. My thumb hovered over the screen like I was defusing a bomb. Then I tapped. They were honored to invite me. That's what it said. A one-day guest lecture for the advanced vocal students, part of a new series they were launching called Resilience in the Arts. Cute, neat, corporate. They mentioned they'd followed my journey with admiration. They referenced the viral song, the interviews, the Fallon performance. But they never mentioned why I had left their halls in the first place. Not a single word about the girl who once whispered through gauze in a hospital bed because their favorite prodigy pushed her down a staircase. And yet, I didn't delete the email. I saved it. Then I sat on my bed for an hour and asked myself the question I never thought I'd have to ask again. Would I go back? Jay was the first person I told. His reaction wasn't helpful. You should do it. Why? Because they need to see what they lost. I shook my head. That's not why I'd go. If I do this, it can't be for revenge. Jay nodded. But can it be for you? The next morning, I replied, yes, I accept. But under one condition. I speak freely. No pre-screening, no censorship. My story, my voice. They agreed within an hour. Of course they did, because now, I was a safe success story, marketable pain. But what they didn't realize, what they never understood, was that I was no longer speaking to them. I was speaking to the ones still sitting in those chairs, wondering if their silence meant failure. When the day came, I didn't wear black. I wore light bone white trousers, a soft pink blouse, nothing dramatic. Because I wasn't coming back to haunt the place. I was coming back to redeem the space I was forced to leave. Walking through those hallways was like walking through a memory you thought you'd outgrown. The paint was newer, the posters updated, but the stairs, still there, still quiet, still watching. I paused at the landing where I fell. No one else noticed, but I did. I ran my fingers along the wall. There was still a tiny crack near the bottom step. And I whispered, not in fear, not in grief, but as a kind of prayer, you didn't end me. Then I walked into the auditorium. There were about 50 students waiting, some with notebooks, some whispering, all curious. They didn't know who I had been here. They only knew who I was now. And that difference was everything. I began without notes, no PowerPoint, just a mic and a chair. 2 years ago, I couldn't speak. Literally, my voice had been damaged so badly that doctors weren't sure it would ever come back. It wasn't an illness. It wasn't a mistake. It was an act of violence. And I never got an apology. The room went still. No scribbling, no coughing, just silence. The kind I used to fear. Now, it was mine to hold. This school, this stage meant the world to me. I dreamed of standing here as a lead vocalist. Instead, I'm standing here as a survivor. And honestly, that feels better. I looked out at them not as students, but as me, back then. I told them the truth, the pain, the breakdown, the rebuilding. And I ended with this. You are more than your high notes. You are more than your stage presence. You are more than the roles people cast you in. Your voice isn't just what comes out of your mouth. It's how you choose to live. The auditorium erupted into applause. Not polite, not professional, personal. Afterwards, students lined up to speak with me. One girl said, I was thinking of quitting. This place makes me feel invisible. I held her hand and said, maybe it's not you who's invisible. Maybe they just haven't learned how to see yet. She cried. I almost did too. Before I left, I walked into the old practice room, the one with the warped piano, and on the window, someone had written in dry erase marker, sing like nobody broke you. I smiled. And underneath it, I added, sing because you're still here. That night, I got an email from someone anonymous. No greeting, just this. You didn't just reclaim your story. You gave the rest of us permission to begin ours. And I knew then. This visit wasn't closure. It was ignition. Have you ever returned to the place that tried to erase you and stood taller than before? Tell me in the comments. Because sometimes redemption isn't in being welcomed back. It's in walking in like you never needed the welcome at all. The lights were blinding, but this time, I didn't squint. I stared right into them. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't stepping on stage as a character, not a polished product, not a mysterious voice behind a curtain. Just me, Ava Reed. And this wasn't just another show. This was the night I stopped performing survival and started celebrating it. It was a benefit concert, small venue, big meaning. All proceeds went to support survivors of artistic abuse, singers, dancers, actors who'd been silenced by the very institutions that were supposed to nurture them. I didn't hesitate when I was invited. This wasn't just a performance slot. This was a declaration that the girl who once couldn't speak was now being handed the mic, on her own terms. Backstage, I stood in front of the mirror. No glitter, no stylist, just a white linen blouse, black jeans, and a voice I had earned in blood and therapy. My hands trembled not from fear, from memory, because every show I'd done until now, I'd carried a layer of distance, a brand, a shield. But tonight, I was going out without armor, and that made it real. Jay peeked into the dressing room. "You good?" I nodded, then paused. "No," I admitted. "I'm honest." "That's better." He smirked. "Let's go make people feel things." The stage was small, intimate. Candles on each table. No barrier between artist and audience. Exactly how I wanted it. The MC introduced me not as a rising star, not as a viral voice, not even as Arya Stoney. Just, "Please welcome Ava Reed, a voice you already know." Even if you didn't know her name. I stepped into the spotlight, and the room exhaled. I opened with Scars in stereo. No band, just me and a guitar. Every note I plucked, I remembered the girl in the hospital who couldn't hum. Every lyric I sang, I thought of the girls who sent me messages like, "I didn't think I deserved to sing anymore." The crowd didn't cheer after the song. They stood, quiet, reverent, as if clapping would somehow disrupt the ache in the air. Then I told a story, not a performance, a truth. The first time I stood on a stage, I was 13. I sang to escape. The second time I was 16. I sang to prove something. But tonight, I'm not singing for anything. I'm singing because I can. And then I began my final song, a new one, unreleased, written 2 weeks prior, in the middle of the night, after dreaming of the staircase again. It was called Echo Proof. The chorus went, "You can push me down the stairs but you'll never reach my sound. I'll echo louder from the ground." The audience broke. Tears, fists to chests. Some stood, some sat with their heads bowed. And me, I didn't cry. I smiled, because I had become the sound they once tried to bury. After the show, a woman approached me. Mid-30s, strong jaw, shaky hands. "I hadn't sung in 10 years, she whispered. "Until tonight, until you." She didn't say more. She didn't need to. I hugged her, longer than strangers should, because in that moment, we weren't strangers. We were echoes of the same silence finding our voices again. Later that night, back in my apartment, I opened my window. The city was loud, but inside me, stillness. Not the anxious stillness I used to dread, but the kind that says, "You showed up. You didn't hide. You were heard." And for once, I didn't need to post about it. Didn't need to document or explain, because I had lived it, and that was enough. Have you ever stopped performing and just been? Have you ever stopped performing and just been? Tell me in the comments, because your truth doesn't need staging. It just needs space. It was just a message request, buried beneath fan mail, industry emails, and promotional spam. No profile picture, no name, no subject line. I almost deleted it without reading, but something, call it intuition, or maybe unfinished business, made me pause. And when I opened it, everything stopped. Because the first word was my name. Not Aria, not Miss Reed. Just Ava, followed by, "I never thought you'd see this." I knew who it was before I read the rest. The message was long, more of a confession than an apology. No emojis, no filler, just words that felt like they'd been clawed out of someone who didn't know how to bleed honestly until it was too late. She wrote, "I'm not expecting forgiveness. I know that would be arrogant, but I have to say this before the weight crushes me." And I kept reading. Even though every word felt like walking backward through a fire I thought I'd already escaped. "You were never supposed to disappear." That line hit me like a punch to the ribs. Because what do you mean I wasn't supposed to disappear? You watched me vanish, and you smiled. That day on the stairs, I didn't plan it. I won't pretend I did, but I also didn't stop myself. I knew you were there. I knew I was angry. And I let my hands act before my conscience caught up. That wasn't an accident. That was an admission. And somehow, that made it worse. Because it confirmed everything I already knew, but hearing it made the scar ache in ways I thought it had numbed over. The truth is, I hated you because I wanted to be you. You had something I never did. People felt you. When you sang, they didn't just listen. They ached. I stopped reading for a second. Just sat there, phone in my lap, the air in my lungs turning sharp. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Validation? Anger? Closure? None of it came. Only this strange, hollow ache. After everything, I watched you rise like someone watching a ghost walk again. At first, I was terrified. Then I was jealous. Then I was ashamed. You sang louder than I thought you ever could. And somehow, you sang without spitting my name once. That hurt more than any revenge you could have taken. That was the part that broke me. Because it was true. I never dragged her name. Never wrote diss tracks. Never gave interviews where I exposed her. Not because I was noble, but because I didn't want her shadow in my spotlight. I didn't want my legacy to include her name at all. They've stopped calling me now. The studios, the agencies, even the school. I'm the girl who once tried to bury gold under jealousy. No one wants to be near that kind of heat. I exhaled slowly. Good. But the part of me that once curled into corners, afraid to speak, also whispered, then maybe you finally understand. I don't expect a reply. I wouldn't even know what to do with one. But I needed you to know that every time someone praises your voice, I hear the echo of my own silence. Not because you ruined me, but because I ruined myself, and you kept singing anyway. That line stayed with me for days. I didn't reply. I didn't block her. I didn't even screenshot it for anyone. I just sat with it, let it marinate, let it rot or ripen, I wasn't sure which. But something inside me shifted. Not forgiveness, but finality. The kind that doesn't slam doors, just walks out and leaves them open. 2 weeks later, I went live on Instagram. Not for a song, not for a promotion, just a truth. Sometimes the people who hurt you carry their own silence for years. And sometimes, they whisper a sorry into your inbox, not to make you forgive, but to admit they were never strong enough to face you. That doesn't make them a villain forever. But it doesn't make them your story's author either. You are still the one holding the pen. People flooded the comments. This gave me chills. I got a message like that last year. I didn't know how to process it. Thank you for showing us we don't need to reply to find peace. That night, I wrote one sentence in my journal. Not a song lyric, not a reflection. Just this. Not every apology needs a stage. And with that, I turned the page. Has someone ever tried to undo years of damage in one message? Tell me in the comments. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is read it and say nothing back. It was supposed to be a simple mentorship session, a private invite from a nonprofit that supported underrepresented young artists, mostly girls from underserved backgrounds, many of them first-time performers. They asked if I'd be willing to sit in on one of their local showcases, offer feedback, maybe share a few words at the end. I said yes. Not because I thought I had anything profound to offer, but because I remembered what it was like to sing in front of strangers and wonder if anyone would see me. And maybe, I wanted to be the person I once needed in the crowd. The venue was small, a community center gym transformed with fairy lights and folding chairs. No stage, just a carpeted corner and a microphone. About 20 young singers, ages ranging from 11 to 19, some nervous, some fierce, some barely making eye contact with the audience. And yet every one of them carried something that no amount of training could replicate: rawness. The kind that can't be taught, only survived. I was seated near the back, hoodie up, mostly unnoticed. Which was perfect, because this wasn't about me. Until she stepped up. She couldn't have been older than 15. Braided hair, oversized jacket, hands shaking. She didn't look at anyone, just closed her eyes, adjusted the mic, and started singing. The first line wasn't loud, it wasn't powerful, it was barely audible. But it stopped the entire room, because it wasn't just a song, it was a wound, unfolding. Her voice cracked on the second note, not from lack of skill, but from truth. I leaned forward, instinctively holding my breath, because I recognized it, the tremble, the hesitation, the defiance buried under layers of fear. I wasn't just watching her sing, I was watching myself 6 years ago. Every girl who's ever been told to shrink, to soften, to shut up, and yet still opens her mouth and tries anyway. The lyrics were familiar. Not because I'd heard them before, but because I'd lived them. Lines like, I don't want to be brave, I just want to feel safe when I speak. Or, I used to practice silence like it was a hymn. My throat burned. Not from emotion, from memory. Because somehow, this girl, this stranger, had pulled pieces of my own past into her melody. And when the final note wavered into stillness, the room didn't erupt. It exhaled, like everyone had been holding their breath the whole time. The applause came slow, soft, respectful. She smiled barely and turned to leave the corner. Then she looked up and saw me. I hadn't planned to be recognized, but something about her expression changed. Like she'd just connected a thread. She walked over, not shy, not timid, just real. "You're Ava Reed," she said, not as a question. I nodded. She took a deep breath, then asked quietly, "Was it weird hearing yourself in someone else's voice?" I didn't know what to say. So I said the only thing I knew to be true. It wasn't weird. It was holy. We sat together during intermission. She told me her name was Kiara. She'd been writing songs for 2 years, but only recently had she started sharing them out loud. "I used to sing in my closet," she said. "My mom thought I was just playing music. I wasn't. I was trying to survive the day." I nodded. "That's how I started too." Then she asked the question I've never fully known how to answer. "When did it stop hurting?" I paused, looked at her, then said, "It didn't. But now I know what to do with the pain." After the show, the organizer asked if I wanted to say a few words. I didn't prepare anything. I just stood, took the mic and said, "You might think your voice is small, that it's shaky, broken, but I need you to know something. A cracked voice sings truth better than a perfect one ever could." I glanced at Kiara. "Tonight, I didn't just hear music. I heard healing. And I want you to remember that your story doesn't need approval to be worthy. It just needs air." I handed the mic back. That was it. No song, no spotlight, just truth. And sometimes that's enough. Kiara hugged me before I left, tight, fierce, and whispered something in my ear. "If you hadn't sung first, I wouldn't have believed I could." I squeezed her hand. Didn't say a word, because no part of me needed to. That night, I wrote a new lyric in my notebook. I didn't just find my voice, I gave someone else permission to use hers. It hasn't become a song yet. Maybe it never will. Maybe it doesn't have to. Have you ever seen a version of yourself in someone else's beginning? Tell me in the comments. Because when your healing becomes someone else's permission, you're no longer just a survivor. You're a seed. I used to walk into rooms like I owed everyone an explanation. For being there, for taking up space, for daring to speak when I wasn't invited. It didn't matter how much I achieved, how many streams, how many headlines, how many stages I filled. Somewhere deep inside, a voice always whispered, "Don't be too much. Don't be too loud. Don't forget you were once nothing." But on this day I walked into the room differently. And I didn't apologize for it. It was an industry panel, 5 artists, 2 executives, 1 moderator with perfect posture and a tendency to interrupt when things got uncomfortable. The topic? Authenticity in modern music. Which, of course, meant 5 different brands performing authenticity in polished packaging. I was the last to speak, and I planned to sit quietly, say my few lines, and leave without ripples. That was the plan, until one of the execs said something that made my blood freeze. "We love what Ava's done, she really turned tragedy into product. That's the dream, isn't it?" The room chuckled, nods, sips of coffee. Like he'd just complimented my outfit. I felt something sharp move in my chest. The girl I used to be, she would have laughed politely, maybe stayed quiet, maybe swallowed it, gone home, written a sad lyric about it, and called it growth. But that girl, she's gone. I looked directly at him, then at the crowd, and said, "I didn't turn tragedy into a product. I turned it into power. And if you think what I went through was branding, then you've never had your entire identity taken from you just because someone felt threatened by your voice." Silence. Real silence. Not tension. Reckoning. I kept going. You see a viral artist. I see a girl who whispered into a pillow for months because she was afraid her voice would never come back. You see marketing potential. I see every time I almost gave up. I didn't package trauma. I survived it. And I'll never apologize for turning pain into something beautiful. The moderator tried to redirect. Something about time and moving on. But the room had already changed. People leaned forward now. People listened. Because I wasn't branding. I was breaking the mold, the narrative, the lie. After the panel, a young producer approached me, probably mid-20s, nervous hands. I just wanted to say, that was the first time I've ever seen someone in this industry call out the way people exploit our stories. He looked away, then added, my sister was silenced by a choir teacher, never sang again. I think your voice gave her back something. I didn't smile. I just nodded. Because not everything deserves a pretty bow. Some truths are better left raw. I went home that night and stood in front of my bathroom mirror. I stared at my own reflection and said, out loud, you don't need to apologize for the space you take up. And something in me softened, like I'd finally given myself permission to exist without justification. Later that week, I posted a video. Just 30 seconds. No music, no caption. Just me saying, you don't owe anyone an explanation for how you healed. You don't have to make your story easier to digest. You don't have to wrap your pain in a bow for them to clap. You survived. That's enough. The clip exploded, not because it was poetic, but because it was unapologetic. One comment stuck with me. This is the first time I've seen a woman speak without shrinking, and that's when I knew. I wasn't just reclaiming my voice. I was reclaiming presence. Have you ever caught yourself making excuses just for existing? Tell me in the comments. Because healing is not just about being heard, it's about walking into the room without permission and knowing you belong there. There was no red carpet, no velvet rope, no backstage pass, just wooden beams, black curtains, and my name carved into a plaque that no one else had touched. Ava Reed Performance Studio, not named by a foundation, not donated by an alumni board, built by me, funded with everything I had earned, rooted in everything I had lost. And this time, it wasn't about singing. It was about giving others a place to find their voice before someone tried to take it. It started with a question from Kiara, the girl I met months earlier at the youth showcase. She had messaged me one night, where do you go when you need to sing without being watched? And I didn't have a good answer. Not really. Every space I'd ever performed in had eyes, judgment, production value, pressure, but safety, that was rare. So I decided to build it. The idea came fast, but the execution took time. I didn't want something big. I wanted something true. I bought an abandoned dance studio on the outskirts of the city. Old floors, peeling walls, but perfect bones. I hired women, survivors, artists, mothers, students. Together, we painted the walls with lyrics not mine, theirs. We didn't hang gold records. We hung stories, typed out, scribbled, sketched. Some messy, some unfinished, all honest. When it opened, we didn't do a press release, just a post. If you need a room to find your voice, this one's open. No judgment, no eyes, just space. The next week, we had 40 sign-ups. The week after that, 200. And on the wall above the entrance, we put one sentence in thick black paint. They didn't give it to us, so we built it ourselves. The first open mic was quiet, no stage, just a circle. Everyone got 5 minutes. Some read poems, some hummed melodies they hadn't sung out loud since childhood. One girl just sat, breathed deep, and said, I don't know what to share, but this is the first time I haven't felt like I had to explain why I'm here. We clapped anyway, because showing up is a performance of its own. Eventually, someone asked if I'd sing. I didn't have anything planned, but I stepped into the center of the room. No mic, no spotlight, and sang the first song I ever wrote after my silence ended. It didn't matter if I hit the notes. It wasn't about that. It was about proving the silence never won. Kiara was there. She brought 3 friends. They each took a turn. When she sang, her voice cracked twice, but she didn't apologize. She kept going. And when she finished, she turned to me and said, this is the first room I've ever felt like my story didn't need to be explained. I knew what she meant, because I had spent years shaping my voice into something acceptable. Now, I had shaped a space where it could simply be. That night, as I locked up, I stood in the doorway and looked around. The floor still had scuff marks. The curtains still didn't close properly. The soundproofing was imperfect, but none of it mattered, because this wasn't a performance hall. This was a home. For every voice that had ever been told it was too much, too soft, too broken. Later, someone from a major label reached out, wanted to sponsor the space, offered money, exposure, legitimacy. I said no because they didn't build this. We did, with hands that had trembled, with mouths that had been stitched shut, with hearts that had finally learned to beat on their own rhythm. 1 year later, the studio was full, not with fame, with freedom. And I didn't stand on the stage I built to be seen. I stood there to see others. Have you ever built something because the world refused to make room for you? Tell me in the comments. Because when they don't hand you the mic, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is build your own stage.